My name is Ulrike Reinhard. I work as a freelancer and I'm trying to give people and projects a voice who show us how the internet is transforming and reshaping our economies, governments, education systems, and companies. Uh, I'm more than happy to moderate this live stream today. In behalf of the Bundeszentrale für Politische Bildung, I would like to welcome you all. In the run-up of their Bundeskongress in May in Berlin, we will have several live events here on this platform. Our goal is to get a discussion going on the topics closely related to the event's theme, which is participation. What does participation in government issues means? What does it take? How should or how could citizens participate? What influence should they have? What are existing examples? How can we learn participation? I'm very happy today that we have the chance to welcome Ellen Miller here. Hi, Ellen.
Hi, everyone.
She spans for more than 35 years the worlds of nonprofit advocacy, grassroots activism, and journalism out of Washington, D.C., where she's sitting right now, actually. She's a nationally recognized expert on transparency and the influence of money on politics. And today she's here with us as the co-founder and executive director of Sunlight Foundation. Sunlight Foundation is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to using the power of the internet to catalyze greater government openness and transparency. To start this entire live stream here, Ellen will give us a brief statement on Sunlight and its work, and then you are really more than welcome to add questions to the chat. We'll pick them up and then hopefully Ellen will answer them. So here we go, Ellen. The floor is yours. Please go ahead and welcome.
Terrific. Well, thank you for inviting me to be with you today, and hello to everybody who's out there on our live stream. I want to tell you a little bit about Sunlight in my opening remarks, and then I am certainly open to questions that you will have about our work or how we view American politics or what's happening in the world in terms of open government. So the Sunlight Foundation is committed to improving access to government information, all kinds of government information, and making it available online. In fact, redefining the notion that public information in this day and age means that it's accessible online. Our work falls into 5 basic categories. First is the digitization of government data. Second would be building tools and websites and mobile platforms to allow citizens and journalists to engage with this information. Third would be a general platform of citizen engagement. We do reporting and we do advocacy for our government as well. By digitization of data, we mean developing databases out of existing government information, electronic or paper records, taking them out of file cabinets and putting them online. We do this through funding, we do this through technical assistance, and we do it by scraping government websites. We build tools on top of these data because what we find is that data, no matter how much you free it and put it on the internet, still exists in little silos. And so we have to connect the data together in order for people to be able to use it successfully and see the connections between data A and data B in different databases. So we want to make it easy for activists, for citizens, for policymakers to understand the connection and make it easy for them to consume information as well. We don't do this just for the sake of doing it, although one could argue that it is a public good to do it. We're interested in impact. We want to know how this data can have an impact on citizens' interaction with government, how government operates, on political influence, on activism. So we do it for a purpose. We also are involved in engaging citizens directly. It's a priority because we want journalists and activists and online citizens to use what we build. And the potential, of course, is enormous. We provide users with information, with training, with marketing, distributed research projects, and contests to foster the broadest and best practices. And we produce our own media. from breaking stories on our reporting group blog to analyzing the kind and quality of data that's coming from the government to covering important events on a platform we've developed called Sunlight Live. Ultimately, we believe that transparency is government's responsibility. So advocating for changes in how government, and that's whether it's the legislative branch or the executive branch, lobbying for that kind of information is absolutely core to our responsibility and central to our mission. Our policy work combines issue expertise with the knowledge of how transparency can make all of this easier. Technology is critical to everything we do. It allows us to build the communities, to share information, to engage citizens in improving information. I want to just briefly mention a couple of our projects, and you can jot down their names and look at them after we're finished. We've had a number of projects that routinely will have more than 500,000 visitors a month. One of those is called Open Congress. So this takes our legislative branch, both houses of the legislative branch, and takes all the very, we would say, wonky, detailed policy information and makes it simple to understand and simple to follow. So you can understand which members of Congress are sponsoring which piece of legislation. You can leave comments as citizens on that legislation. You can make friends with other people who are following and interested in the same legislation. And you can organize communities of people to weigh in on particular pieces of legislation. We do that at the federal level in the US. And now we've just recently done the mobile app to do that at the state level as well. So each state legislature has one that mimics our federal one. And now we have an iPhone app called Open States that's downloadable and gives you all the information you could possibly want about your own state legislature as well. And in fact, we were having a conversation this morning about merging both of those together. We have another website, hugely successful, called Influence Explorer. And this is a database that has merged together all kinds of disparate data, but not unrelated data. So we've merged together campaign finance data from the state and the federal level. We've merged into that lobbying information from the federal level. We do not have that available in a comprehensive fashion from the state level. We've added in who serves on advisory committees. We've added in data that's collected from a site called regulations.gov. So what do people who make campaign contributions have to say when in the shaping of regulations? And we've added in all kinds of other data about corporate behavior, such as violations of EPA rules, whether a corporation might be on a contractor misconduct data list, as well as data about government spending, grants, and contracts. So Influence Explorer is another one of our key sites. Another site we have, which would be easily adaptable any place in the world, is a site we call Capital Words. And this scrapes the official record of the Congress every single day, takes every single word, and identifies the single most frequently spoken word of the day by the Congress as a whole, or by an individual legislature or a delegation of legislators. And another one of our core products is that all of our data is open source and is accessible through either bulk downloads or APIs, which are programming interfaces on the data that anyone can use to do anything that their imagination wants them, allows them, gives them the lead to do. These APIs have been downloaded and used tens of millions of times. So in a way, not only do we produce front-end tools, but we've also become an engine for back-end resourcing and making this information easily available. I can stop there, Ulrike, and take some questions.
Yeah, maybe the very first question. I mean, everybody out there is welcome to type in your question here in the chat, and we just pick it up. But to get this whole thing started, Ellen, who is using your data? Do you have any ideas who are the users?
Well, we're constantly looking at the numbers of people who are using our data, but we don't have that much information about who these people are. So we're actually in the process now, and you're reminding me that I need to check in with this process, of doing surveys on our various websites to determine actually who is using the data. But the last time we did this, which has been probably 18 months or 2 years ago, we found that it was an older, surprisingly, audience, a wealthier audience than we would have anticipated. But the audience that we're aiming for is what we think of as the average online citizen. And there's a foundation here in the US called the Pew Charitable Trust that regularly surveys who are the online users and for what in politics are they interested. And they have discovered that over half, I think it's 54%, of all adult Americans are online seeking political information and doing something more than just reading and consuming information. They're leaving comments, they're forwarding articles. And so that's the audience that Sunlight has. It's the average online user. Although we are beginning to think of some projects where our database could be accessed even if you don't have broadband communication.
So what would these people do with your data? How could they benefit from it?
Well, we look at all kinds of data. One set of data that we look at is just pure government information. So we have developed a couple of apps that are, one is about healthcare, pure and simple, local information about healthcare. Where can I find nursing homes? Where can I find the ratings for nursing homes? Where can I buy medical related equipment? Things like that. It's taking federal government data and trying to make it usable for the average citizen. The second one of these apps, which we're going to launch, I think, next week, is called Upwardly Mobile. And this is using economic data, city by city. So it's government data. So if I'm working in one city and I'm thinking about taking a job in another city, then you would use this app to say, well, what is the cost of living there? What is the average cost of a house? What are transportation times? And so trying to deliver information that citizens will use in their daily lives, in their everyday lives, not just because they're interested in politics. But another set of our data is clearly designed to hold government accountable, to enable citizens to be able to ask their lawmakers why they voted on such a piece of legislation, when in fact most of their campaign money came from that particular source of information. Another set of data would allow them to say, I see you put in an earmark, a special appropriations request for a bridge in my community, but it's never been built. What's going on here? So a lot of the information we have is really to allow for more accountability and more informed give and take between citizen and their government.
And is there actually conversation going on? Do you track this?
Well, it's very difficult to track it. Sometimes we see it play out on Twitter. Lots of members of Congress have been using Twitter and other social media to communicate with their constituents, their Facebook pages. So we do see that kind of interchange. I think public officials who have embraced the new social media as a way of communicating were a little bit surprised to find that it wasn't just one way. They didn't just talk out, but it allowed people to respond to them and ask them specific questions.
So, I mean, in the US, you are already in the middle of another election campaign. 4 years ago.
It feels like it's gone on too long already.
That's what I think as well, yeah. But 4 years ago, I mean, what we have seen with Obama was really, I mean, he changed the way to run elections, most likely forever. But did he also change the way to govern the country? Do you see more of this transparency stuff?
Yeah, there is no question that he, at the very beginning of his presidency, established a new standard for transparency and openness in government. Certainly the executive orders that he signed the day after he was installed as president were groundbreaking. No administration previously had made such a statement about the need to open up government and the willingness to do that. Implementation is always much more difficult than the statement, but there has been, I would have to say, slow but steady progress. But we continually have to push them. We continually have to take the politics out of this and remind them that open government and open data is good for the economy, that it's good for accountability, that it's good for a way of improving people's perception of government. And at least in the US, perception of the effectiveness of government could not be worse. So anything that they can do in this regard to continue to open data, and they have done a lot. They've created opendata.gov. They've reinvented the contracting.
What is opendata.gov? What is opendata.gov? Can you please explain it, maybe?
Sure. Opendata.gov is a government website at which all the agencies of government are supposed to put all of their data. So there's a central spot for searching for data. So if you went to opendata.gov and you typed in environment, for example, then you would see all of the environmental data that has been put there by the Environmental Protection Agency or the Mining Bureau or the Labor Bureau, but you'd be able to have a single search. At the moment, there's not nearly as much data there to make it a comprehensive database, but it's a goal of government. They created another site, which we're excited about, called ethics.gov. And on this site, you have all kinds of ethics-related filings that people already are required to file, but it makes it easily searchable and easily findable. So if you want to know the personal investments, which is public information of high officials in government, it's easy to find at this one particular site. These are enormous advances, and we're very pleased with that. And I mean, I should add, in part because of our audience, the Open Government Partnership, which is our cooperation with other governments around the world to open their data, has also been a significant initiative of this administration, and we're very pleased with that, and we're very pleased to participate in that.
Yeah. So actually, I have 100 other questions for you, but I really would encourage the audience to come up with some questions. There is just, if you look at the chat, Ellen, Oliver Maka is asking, what was the name of the other initiative you just mentioned?
Well, let's see. So opendata.gov is one. Ethics, as in, law and ethics, ethics.gov, I think is probably the other one that I mentioned.
Ethics.gov, I'll just type it in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Here comes the very first questions from our audience.
Thanks.
Do you expect an influence of open government on the next election?
Yes, I do. In fact, I know many activists that are considering activist-based campaigns, asking members who are running for re-election and their challengers to take a pledge about cleaning out the corruption that is in government and endorsing greater transparency and effectiveness. And so I was actually having lunch with one of them yesterday, and the idea would be that if the member of Congress or the challenger did not actually sign such a pledge, that he or she would be challenged by advertising in the election as not being in favor of open government. So there is a lot of political interest. It is it's very difficult for the candidates themselves to run on this platform, although the president did so in the last election. He promised, one of his promises was an open, transparent government. But because of the way our campaign finance laws are currently operating, he is raising secret money that has an impact on the election because he feels he has no choice but to do this. And so it's very hard. He's compromised in a way about raising the issue of openness, on time, real-time reporting of all kinds of information, because he's part of a system that hasn't changed yet and he doesn't want to unilaterally disarm. In terms of the candidates themselves talking about this, I think we won't see that much of it, but I think we will see a lot of activity in politics by activist and advocacy organizations.
Yeah. So I see many people are typing. Here comes the next question, Al. Do you think women have better opportunities in the political participation via internet?
Well, I think everyone has greater participation possibilities in the internet. I mean, I don't know why women would be particularly advantaged in this world. What's interesting is that in using the internet, we can reach out beyond the audiences that we normally talk to. If you think of the powers that be, the lobbyists, the big contributors, they have sort of a ring around the capitals, the Washington or the state capitals. And if you are a candidate and you want to find people who don't regard themselves as politically active, it's easier to find and create those communities online. So perhaps to the degree that women are better community builders, we can use the online tools we have to organize new people and engage them further and wider and deeper than we've ever done before.
Yeah. So if you can just have a look at the chat again, Ellen. Reinhard Döbel, he typed in
like
quite...
you, I'll put on my glasses.
It's just a matter of age, don't worry. Reinhard Döbel. I've just been alerted to the move of a number of Republican governors to pass new legislation restrictions voting, particularly of supporters of the Democratic Party. Is this and the resistance to it reflected on your system? And what would be the potential of your tools to influence this respective lawmaking in preparation of the coming elections? Wow.
Yeah, the answer is we look at this from a very systemic point of view. So we have developed software that can take model legislation that might be proposed by an organization on the left or the right. There's one on the right called ALEC, A-L-E-C, the American Legislative Exchange Council. They develop model legislation and then they push it out to the various states, and then they push those state legislators to pass pieces of legislation like this. So we have the capacity to look at, because we scrape all of the state legislative information, we can run that through a filter and determine, in fact, whether this particular issue or any other issue has been promoted by ALEC. So there's a U.S. story, you may have heard about it. A young African-American man was shot and killed. He was a teenager. He wasn't armed. It was a piece of legislation that sort of provided for self-defense by people. It turns out that this legislation, which is harboring the man who shot this young child, was promoted by this conservative organization, and it was found to be introduced in 15 or 20 different states. So the beginning of the legislation, we are able to identify now, just because we've developed some software that allows us to filter things and look for matches of words and phrases.
Okay, so audience, if you're not satisfied with an answer, please just again go into the chat and let us know if you want to dig deeper into it, or if you have expected something different. Please let us know. We'll try to do our best to get this really straightforward for you. So next question comes from Oliver Merker, Ellen. Are there any informed participation process in the states based on open data?
I think, well, Sunlight is just beginning to enter the state arena. So we've published our first mobile app called Open States last week. And so we're beginning to put that into the hands of activists now so they can begin to figure out how to use it. So it's a little bit early in the game. However, there's another nonprofit organization that has been working with states on budget data and getting states to actually put up that data, and their sole purpose for doing that is to engage citizens in the discussion around whether the budget reflects their particular priorities. I don't know of any particular successes on that front yet, but there's no doubt that there will be, that this is a growing phenomenon, and that activist groups are learning more and more how to use it.
Okay. Our next question comes from the guest 1802, whoever this is. He says, when I have a look at the open data website that are coming up here in Germany, I very often see bunches of documents instead of processable data formats. Have you collected some experience, Ellen, about what influence the selected data formats have on the use on the data on DataGov?
first of all, let me say, I feel your pain. So we get a lot of data in the U.S. in PDF forms, which means we have to move to optical scanning devices in order to. It slows down the process. It's ridiculous. The entire system has to be changed so that those who have to report whatever they have to report to government, report it in an electronic format, and then it's easy enough to put it out in an electronic format. I would say it's a huge battle in the US. It is a big transition for any government to make, but particularly as more countries are thinking about and opening up their data, they need to be thinking about how they deliver that data as well, because the OCR techniques are still not very good. They're better than they used to be, but it puts another barrier in the way. And frankly, it makes our work, or makes the work of any country, not very scalable, because no one can afford to hand enter data. If we run into databases that we can't scan, and are only available in files, we really just throw up our hands and say, I'm sorry, we can't do this, because it's too costly, it's too time consuming. And so then we'd move to our policy work to say, this is how this data should be made publicly accessible.
But didn't start Obama, when he first came into office, also an initiative that they are going to run this new platform where data will be accessible in other formats?
Yes, well, the open, the data.gov site that I mentioned before does make the data available in several different formats. That's the easiest data they've put out there, but there is so much data. In fact, we have no idea how much data that has to be converted even to a single electronic format, much less converted to multiple formats so that people could use it. I mean, there's a bit of an argument, it's a friendly argument, whether government's job is to simply make the data accessible, focus only on making data accessible in electronic formats, rather than building apps and websites on top of it. The feeling is, and it's a feeling I agree with, that the economics of the situation are, if government made this data accessible electronically, then for-profits and nonprofits will come in and take the data and make it usable, that there's a two-tier responsibility. But without electronic access to data, we're operating in another century.
Yeah. Again, dear audience, please come up with new questions. Meanwhile, Ellen, the conference in May, where you will be there live, is all about participation. Maybe you could give us a take on how transparency is related to participation.
In the U.S., the participation is in terms of engagement with government is struggling. It has been for years. It's related to the increasing cynicism that citizens have about government, who their politicians work for, who their elected officials actually represent. So it's a very serious concern, and in fact, it's one of engaging communities is one of Sunlight's chief goals, because we can get government to release the data, but if citizens won't use it, then what's the point, right? I mean, we don't just do this because it feels good to be done. So we have an organizing team at Sunlight that is engaging online and offline with citizens, both to help them in their state-based advocacy work and showing them how to use tools and websites. One example, a piece of legislation we passed through here in Washington, it's actually a rule change, requires that every piece of legislation that is considered by the U.S. Congress be posted online for 72 hours before it's actually considered. So if you're an environmental activist at the state level or at the federal level, you will be following all this legislation, of course, and you will read the legislation. Now, your constituents may not have time to read every piece of legislation, but you, as the activist group, will read the legislation, and you'll say, Section 42A is a concern to us. You write to all of your constituent members, and they write to their members of Congress. That's a huge way to engage people and alert them to the kinds of things that they might be interested in. and actually maybe stop a bad piece of legislation from going through. Often what happens in the US, and I'm sure all around the world, is a piece of legislation goes through and a reporter looks at it and says, wow, look at that section, look what that did, and no one was paying attention before. So this notion of read the bill, we call it readthebill.org, allows citizens and lawmakers themselves to actually read legislation before it's passed.
Okay, here came two more questions, three more actually. I would be interested in an international comparison concerning the development of open government. Do you have any ideas about this, Ellen? Please let us know.
Really good question, and something that Sunlight is actually just about to embark on. We are expanding our work into the international arena, mostly in the arena of information exchange, learning of best practices. And so one of the things we want to do is to begin to create some kind of grid system so we understand what governments are doing what are the local context for all of this. So I can't answer that question yet. The UK and the US are always held up as being sort of in the forefront. I would suspect that the UK is ahead of us in many respects. But I can't say that definitively at the moment. But I think in the context of this open government partnerships that all of our governments are participating in, and Sunlight's now new deeper dive into this international work, then we will be able to answer that question and maybe set up something, a kind of positive competition for who could be the most open government.
Yeah. Are you actually familiar with what have happened in Iceland? When they were writing,
I have some background. I couldn't tell you all of that, but there are little pockets. I mean, Estonia is well thought of. I mean, these new emerging democracies are doing things. They're literally doing them from scratch. So it's almost easier than the older governments that have to transition from one way of operating to another.
Yeah, this would also be another question before we go back to the chat. I mean, this transition, what you are asking actually your government to do is basically set up an entire new system. How can this ever work?
Well, actually, we have a piece of legislation that we are championing, which is called and again, this is adaptable, it's called the Public Online Information Act. And this is a law, if it would be passed, and it's not likely to pass certainly in this Congress, that would require that any public information that is required to be made publicly available be made available online. So it wouldn't look backwards, it would look forwards. And so this doesn't change, any of the security, any of the things that are, not public information. It simply says that anything that uses the word, you must make this report publicly available, etc., means it would be made available online. So we're conscious of that huge transition. And there will be some transition costs, but in the end, it will all be much cheaper to maintain this, to file this. It would be less costly in terms of time, energy, and effort. And then we would have a public law that would require it moving forward as well.
Okay. Here comes a question from Washington, D.C., actually. You were concerned when Anesh Chopra resigned without a replacement. Now Todd Park has replaced him and is working with U.S. CIO Stephen Van Racker. How have they done so far on releasing open data and making government more transparent, accountable, and enabling civic entrepreneurs to make useful services? What could they do better, and what do they need to do next?
Well, I think the answer to this question is, let me draw a more universal point out of it. The people inside the government, no matter which government, will determine a lot of how this unfolds, how quickly it unfolds, how seriously they take the task, and whether or not more people are really into this and really helping it happen. So our first and only CTO, Anesh Chopra, was one of these kinds of people, as is the person who's just taken this position, Todd Park. Todd Park was the CTO at an agency in the government for health and human resources, and he did a terrific job. He was an outstanding leader in the lead to open government, and I expect he will play exactly that same kind of role now as the US CTO. But it's way too soon to judge. I think I'm not even sure he's on the job. He was just been appointed in the last couple of weeks or so. But I think we do have a terrific team at the top, as we did in the early days of the administration. We also had a terrific team at the top. But the question is, what happens in the agency layer, and how quickly will they comply with the request for information? Because it's not required by law, so it's a voluntary disgorgement of information and data, and there's a natural reluctance by government to make data available for the very reason that a place like the Sunlight Foundation wants it. Information is power. We want that information to become a powerful tool for citizens to use. Government understands that. Information is power. Thank you very much. They'd like to keep it to themselves so they're not asked questions about it. But I think it's too soon to judge how the new leadership, but I'm extremely hopeful about this new leadership that we have in the US. But it's an important lesson for other governments, which is at the top, you must have people who really genuinely believe in open data and its importance.
I think there is no bottom-up approach as soon as you enter government. Huh? It has to be top-down on a level, otherwise.
It has to be top-down, and you have to have champions, and in the US there are many, many champions in government. But one of our colleagues called it a clay layer, in between the people who are champions for open government inside the bureaucracy, and the champions at the top is a sort of bureaucracy that it just grinds very slowly. Again, a universal concept, and it was actually Tim O'Reilly who used this term, the clay layer, and it's a great phrase, and it describes why government is so slow at doing almost anything.
Okay, here we go. Next, again from Digifile. What do you think of the Open Government Partnership as it stands? Are you going to Brasilia? Is it good PR, or is there genuine competition emerging between countries to be more open? Does EITI matter? Why?
All right, well, let me give you a couple of answers. I indeed was more skeptical of the Open Government Partnership when it first launched. But now I have seen that, in fact, many countries are sort of rising to a level of expectations in terms of participation, and this can only be a good thing. I'm impatient. I want to wave a magic wand and make every country's data completely accessible and available. I know I'm too realistic to know that's not going to happen. So that in fact, the statement of the Open Government Partnership is raising expectations both among governments and citizens, and that is a really good thing. And alas, I am not going to Brasilia, but our policy director will be there, and he's operating a panel, and I can't remember the subject matter of his panel.
Okay.
I'm coming to Germany. He gets to do the less fun trips. I'd rather be in Germany.
That's very sweet of you. We are looking forward to having you there in May. So, Band G is asking, in Germany, government documents are often written in incomprehensible German. Ulrike knows what I mean. Whatever. How is that in the United States? Are there... I think I know this guy. How is this in the United States? Is it understandable for normal people?
No. It's exactly the same problem in the U.S. So Sunlight is also a foundation funder. We fund other organizations, and a woman we funded who was doing some work in New Orleans, a local community, was visiting with me a couple of weeks ago, and she said, we translate everything into 3 languages in the city of New Orleans. And I said, really? What languages would those be? I mean, Spanish obviously is a huge second language in the U.S. She said, we translate everything into Spanish. We translate everything into Vietnamese because we have a large Vietnamese population. And we translate everything into plain English. And it just stopped me dead in my tracks because it's so smart. Because the constituents she is working with is a particularly poor constituency, and so even more challenged than the high school, potentially than just the high school educated, much less the college level educated. But what we have found is that we take the legislative language from Congress, and if you create an easier way to interface with it more people can read the language and understand it. If you give them a 150-page bill, they'll get lost immediately. But our Open Congress site actually breaks bills into sections, allows people to focus on that section and to comment on it. And frankly, we are stunned by the number of people who will leave comments on legislation that's important to them. One example, unemployment insurance legislation. There's usually some form of that pending in every Congress. We'll have 100,000 comments left on a bill like that. So people can read legislation, and we should not underestimate both what they can read and what they are interested in. But we do have the same problem of very complicated language, not plain English, as my colleague in New Orleans said.
Yeah, but for example, when you have this piece of law where you get 100,000 comments on it, what is going to happen with these comments? Did you ever see a piece of law really be changed afterwards, be rewritten?
Well, we know that a lot of our readership for this Open Congress site actually come from people, we're assuming staff on Capitol Hill. So they are looking to see what people have to say. And in order to facilitate the comments, making it at least to the lawmakers rather than just remaining on this website, we've developed a number of tools where you can write emails to your legislator and allow people to organize around. So if there are 100,000 people commenting on a jobs bill, those people can go off in a little corner of the website and have their own conversations. Then they can write letters, they can organize petitions, etc. So we're providing the tools and the means to make it easy from a site that is already very popular and that people are already using.
Okay, there is another question from Oliver Merker. You were talking about open but data initiatives. Are there good examples of participatory budgeting in the states on local and or federal level?
It's a good question, and I really don't have a definitive answer to that. Everyone is interested in open budgeting, and budget work became a fairly recent, or in the last 2 or 3 years, aspect of what Sunlight is actually looking at. And I have not yet seen, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, a really sophisticated site where people can contribute to budget decisions where lawmakers are actually paying attention. So if anyone who's on this chat knows of some, I'd love you to add those names to the chat. But I don't know personally of any that have gotten to the level of where it's really successful. There are a few things in the U.S. which are interesting. But they're more in the information side of things. There's a website. It's actually a game-like interface called Budget Hero, and this allows you, the user, to decide where you would like your budget dollars to go. And it's fascinating because I've played this game several times. I can't balance the budget either. And so the gaming interface is very successful, and there might be some others that are out there that are moving in this space as well.
Okay, here's some more. No, people are just typing, Elsie. Anything else coming here from the audience? Or I'll go back to one of my questions here, Alan. I mean, Sunlight has been around for a couple of years now, and I mean, you can say you're kind of very influential in the US. What would you say are your greatest achievements so far, where you say, wow, here we really had an impact and, drove change?
Oops, I
think we just lost you, lost your picture.
Let's see, I'm back. I shouldn't push buttons.
I'm back. So it's only me left here.
Nope, I'm back.
Hopefully Alan is coming back.
I think I am back.
Alan, can you hear me?
I can hear you, and you should be able to see me. Let's see.
Maybe she can restart the system. Here we go again. Alan?
I can see you. Can you see me?
We can't see you.
All right, let me play with something else here. I don't know what happened.
Okay.
How's that?
I can't hear anything.
Oh, goodness. It looks like all my systems are turned on. I apologize. Let's see. A couple of minutes here.
I'm not sure if people can hear me or can see me. If you can give me a sign on the chat, please.
You can hear and see both of us, huh? Well, why don't I go ahead then, even
okay,
if
so I'll just, I can't hear anything, but Alan, if you can hear me, just give me a sign.
I can hear you.
So there was one more question, Alan, coming in. Sunlight has about 8 journalists on staff in the reporting group. As part of this focus on international open government, will you decide more of what those resources to documenting and sharing what's happening in our countries? The current stories are very focused on campaign finance, legislation, and DC politics.
More reporting on the international scene is not currently.
Are you going to have a take on this, Alan? And I just start my system new.
All right. I'm responding now. So the question is whether our reporting group will be focusing on international issues, situations, investigative reporting. And the answer to that is we will not. The international work that we're embarking on really is in the field of more of what I call information sharing, setting of policy norms, exchanges, particularly amongst the technologists. And so that's going to be our initial work, but we do not see expanding our investigative reporting to the international scene. There are many people who are doing that work really well. It will be working mostly with the NGO communities around the world as well. Ulrike had, can you hear me now? There was one last question, and I'd be glad to answer that, which was about Sunlight's impact that we've had in our 6 years of history. And I made a couple of notes. One of the things that we focused a lot on was getting the U.S. Congress to change some of the rules and some of the laws in how data has been made open and will be made open in the future. And we've been quite successful at that. We've also gotten the U.S. Congress to pay attention to this issue more carefully, the issue of transparency, by establishing a Congressional Transparency Caucus. And this is something that we're quite involved with in terms of bringing speakers to them and raising various issues. I think I mentioned earlier that Congress did pass a rule that requires now all legislation to be posted online for 72 hours before it's considered, another major success. Sunlight was very involved in saving our e-government fund, which funds all of these new initiatives from the administration, and being very successful with that as well. Another success, I mentioned this in passing before, the APIs on our data have passed 325 million uses. That's a lot in terms of the kinds of things that we're fueling and powering. I think there has been a part of Sunlight's work which is not measurable, but hugely important also, is the fact that we are part of changing the cultural expectation of what people expect from government. And that has been, there's a rising expectation as the public expects to be able to receive online information about the weather before they go to bed at night, whatever time that is, make a plane reservation at 2 a.m. if they're sleepless. they are also now expecting, in part because we're providing it and we're advocating for it, more information about their politics and their
So I'm back
politicians
again,
and
and I
what their
can hear
government is
you,
doing.
Alan. Thank you. I'm not sure what was the
Welcome
latest
back.
question you answered. Was this?
So the last question that I answered was the one you asked before we had our little snafu, which was the impact that sunlight has had in various ways.
So there is a
I'll
last one from Benedict Meurer. Should there be real-time transparency regarding all concerns, or should there be limits of transparency?
Yes, there should be limits of transparency. Sunlight has not entered into the fight in the U.S. over classified data. What data should be classified? How should it be classified? I would say we probably have a prejudice that there is data that is, in fact, overclassified, and that opening up that data would be a positive. But we are talking about data that is already made publicly accessible. Information, data that the government collects that would affect the privacy for individuals, of course that should not be made available. Anything that would jeopardize national security, of course that should be not made available. We are more in the center of this argument, and I'm not sure it's much of an argument with this administration. It's more of a, like, how much faster can you make it available to us, that public data collected by the government can only benefit the public. It's their data after all, and they should have access to it because it can improve their lives. It can create efficiencies in government. It can make it can create economic incentives, and so our focus is, on public data, not, and recognizing that there is a sphere for private information. So
my really very last question would be, Ellen, before we close up, is how can we encourage citizens really to participate in government processes? I mean, it's one thing to ask the governments open up data, but if we ourselves don't take this responsibility and participate within these processes, nothing will happen, right? So how can we encourage these people? How and what is?
No, that's exactly right.
No, go ahead.
Well, it is a big job. It's a tremendous job, and I think the answer is by providing them with information that is meaningful to their lives. Whether they want a phone app that will scan, that uses government data to scan product information so they know whether the product they're buying is healthy or not, to figure out what can citizens use in their daily lives or in their making their political choices, and then delivering that data to them in an easy, usable fashion. I think the mobile platform is really going to be the next big wave of how people use information. We're certainly moving into that space in a much bigger way than we ever have before. Because it deals with the issue of lack of broadband, the fact that smartphones in particular are so widespread in most countries of the world, that we have to deliver what people want in a way that's timely.
Okay, so thanks a lot, Ellen. Is there anything else? Is there anything we left out?
You're very welcome.
Would love to share with us, or are you?
I'll hold some of that back for my visit.
Thanks a lot. Also, thanks a lot to the audience for all these very, very interesting questions. I think we really got a broad range here of the entire topic. I really appreciated this. The stream was recorded. They are still recording, I can see, so it will be available afterwards on this website, and also, I guess, maybe if you want on yours, Alan. Before we close off, I would love to invite all of you again for a live stream on April 11th. We actually will have Birgitta Jondersdatter from Iceland on the chat. She was really part of the citizens who wrote the new constitution in Iceland, and she is really very, very active citizen on many levels and is really encouraging also other people to participate in political processes. So we'll have this on April 11th here, and yeah, we hope to keep this discussion going, and wish to everybody a wonderful evening, and to you, Ellen, a wonderful day. It's just midday in Washington. Okay.
Thanks to all of you. Enjoyed it.
So enjoy your lunch.
Just midday in
And
Washington.
thank
I'm going to
you.
go have some lunch
Hope
now.
to see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.